Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by two guests, both co-founders of Trackstar, Jeremy Schneck and Daniel Langer. And we're going to talk a little bit about Trackstar, why they came up with this idea, how they founded the company, what they do. And we're also going to talk a little bit about what exactly is a universal API and how it plays a part in our lives from the WMS perspective and what their view on the overall WMS landscape is. So, guys, welcome to the show. How are you both?
We're good. Thanks for having us. Long time listener, first time call.
Yeah, we love those. Definitely. We love to get our listeners on as guests. So appreciate that for sure, Jeremy, and welcome to the show and happy to get you guys on. I've heard a lot about Trackstar and I've seen you around in the ecosystem or the ecosphere, we'll say, of the industry. So definitely very interested to dive into what it's all about today. So Jeremy, why don't you kick us off and tell us, just give us a brief overview of what Trackstar is and maybe tell us a little bit about kind of the founding story as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. Trackstar is a universal API for warehouse management systems. Most of the time I break my intro on Trackstar into two buckets. What's a WMS? What is a universal API? I think the what is a WMS side for your listeners, I will go through a little more quickly, but
sure.
Like everyone knows, WMS or warehouse management system is a system of record for all data that lives within a physical warehouse. WMS are used to track the inflow of goods in and out of warehouses. Supply chain is I think if my stats are correct, $10 to $12 trillion industry. I believe 90% plus of goods flow through a warehouse at one point or another. So when we buy a product off shelf, 9 out of 10 times that good will at some point go through a warehouse. And the point being, WMS are a really critical system for warehouse operators, and it tracks and stores really valuable information around the movement of goods. What's arriving at the warehouse, what's in the warehouse, what's leaving it, order, shipment data, and more. But what's the challenge? So this data is really valuable, but the challenge is there's hundreds of different WMS out there. There's the off-the-shelf systems that anyone can buy if the three of us opened a warehouse tomorrow, whether that's a Deposco, Vericor, Paccio, InfoPlus, ShipHero. The list goes on. And there's also a lot of 3PLs that have built their own custom WMS in-house, like a DCL in California, because they've been around for 10, 20, 30 years and there weren't great off-the-shelf systems when they first get started. So on one side of the equation, there's a lot of different WMS. They are highly fragmented ecosystem. They're hard to integrate with, but they hold really valuable data. So what does Trackstar do as a universal API? A universal API builds integrations into all of those different systems and then normalizes that into a common data model with single unified API endpoints for folks to connect with. So software companies, instead of having to build integrations into each WMS one after another, which is a huge slog because there's hundreds out there, they connect once to our product and now are pre-integrated to all the different systems out there. We support 85 systems today. We're adding new ones every week. And every time we build the system, 86, 87, 88, all the way through 100, because we map it to our common data model, software companies using our API don't need to do any extra work. So we are unifying the data from a very fragmented landscape into our normalized schema, and we make it so cool software can build tech without having to worry about the integration headache that is so pervasive in this industry. But Daniel, let me know if I missed anything there.
No notes.
No notes. All right.
Yeah.
Wow. Perfect execution by Jeremy. Very, very interesting there. And I'm curious, like, how did this idea come about? Like, how did you stumble across this problem set or this challenge and decide, like, okay, we need to solve this?
So we were originally working on a different product, Jeremy and I.
Okay.
Back in, I guess it was 2022, we started working together. And I used to work at a company called Datadog, which is a monitoring company for developers. And through a series of serendipitous events, Jeremy and I started working on this idea to bring kind of a Datadog for e-commerce brands, right? This monitoring product to help people running brands understand their operations more smoothly. And so we built this product that was checking if you had issues in your checkout flow or site speed issues and things of that nature. And honestly, it wasn't quite sticking. But what happened while we were building that is all these brands would come to us and say, hey, can you connect to our warehouse or to our
Mm.
3PL and help us figure out what's going on inside of that? And we'd talk to 20 brands and they would name 20 or 25 different warehouse systems or 3PLs that we'd have to connect to. And
Yeah.
we went, man, we really don't want to do that. Like, that sounds like
Mm.
a huge integration challenge. And I actually joked back in 2022, I said, man, I really wish there was a universal API for WMS. Like, I'd pay for that.
Mm.
And kind of shoot it away and thought, yeah, that seems like a hard problem. No, thank you. Flash forward 9 months ish, Jeremy and I got into Y Combinator. And during our time there, we realized we had to step away from our old problem. And we realized we should be running towards this hard challenge of this universal API for warehouse management systems, not running away from it because it's hard, but actually running towards it. And so, again, through a series of serendipitous conversations, we kind of reinvigorated this idea and realized, oh man, we should really explore this. And I would say around March, April of 2023, we hit the ground running and started talking to all these different software companies who had all these different use cases for needing to connect to WMS. And we haven't looked back since. So,
Mm.
um, long story short, we uncovered this ourselves, building software, wanting to integrate with all these WMS, but not wanting to go do all these one-off integrations.
so so you kind of had the need yourself, right? And then
Yeah,
you're like, oh, actually, this is the problem to solve, really.
yeah,
So very interesting there, and I think it's really interesting to. You said you started in 2022, so it's been a couple years, right? And I think that we've seen, more and more kind of software come into the industry. So I'm curious from your perspectives, like, how have you seen that evolution of software in our industry kind of develop over these last 3 years, and how has that integration become even more critical?
Yeah, I think a really great analogy, and the company that invented the space of universal API is a company called Plaid. Plaid built
Mm.
integrations into all the different banks, normalized it to a single API, and then fintechs, whether that's a Robinhood or a Venmo, they connect once to Plaid and they have all the banking integrations they can offer. Why I bring up that story is when Plaid came on the market, it led to a huge rise in the number of fintechs out there because Venmo really couldn't exist if it didn't integrate with banks. But
Sure.
this universal API made it really easy where the integration challenge was removed from the equation in totality, where now everyone's like, oh, I can get banking data. We're actually seeing the same thing happen in the supply chain space. I think there's two things. One is we chat with a lot of software companies that are early stage startups, and they'll tell us, oh, I was talking to a VC firm because I'm going to raise capital, and they had this worry about how am I going to handle the integrations. But they also, in the same sentence, said, you're going to have this integration challenge. You should talk to Trackstar. They're going to make your life really easy where you don't need to build two products in one, an integration product and build your core
Mm.
product. Trackstar will handle all of your integrations and you can just focus on your core product. So we're actually seeing a lot of really cool new tech in supply chain and ops that are able to grow much more effectively and quickly because they can close any deal, whether they're selling to warehouses or brands, because they don't have to worry about brand A is on Ship Hero, brand B is on Packio, brand C through F are on custom systems. They can just tell them, hey, we already support you, we can onboard you. So I think that's like one part of the equation is it's really cool to see as a company that we're removing this burden that lets people succeed more easily. And then the second side of it is I feel like exogenous supply chain events happen once every 10 years. It used to be like oil crisis
Mm.
puts a spotlight on supply chain. But in the last 5 years alone, we've had tariffs in this year. We've had COVID.
Yeah.
We had the Suez Canal. You have Baltimore Bridge. You have port strikes, massive congestion. Every year, there's a huge magnifying glass on supply chain. Brands realize I need to get my operations buttoned up. Software realizes there's a massive opportunity to build really cool tech to improve supply chain ops functionality, and that's led to a big rise in companies in the space. So I think now is one of the best times ever for people to build supply chain tech, both from a macro environment and an ease of building, because there's less friction to get a good product off the ground.
Interesting. Yeah. What do you think, Daniel?
I think the last thing I want to add is I don't know if our product could have existed. Definitely, 10 years ago, I would say almost no way. Even 5 years ago,
Interesting. Yeah.
is iffy, and I think it's due to there has been an increase in the digitization of this warehouse data at all. And I think for so long, the data inside the WMS was locked away as something that was untouchable. And I think it was really Shopify that helped set the standard for, hey, this data actually needs to be able to pass back and forth between systems, figure it out. And
Mm.
so all these different WMS have figured out ways to transmit data in one form or another. It's not always a beautiful API, but transmit data in and out. And so I think without that ability, it would have been even harder for us to build this product than it already is. So I think the digitization of the WMS and the need for it allowed us to build this at the right time.
Mm. Yeah, thumbs up, definitely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear that perspective, like that, like you said, like 5 years, 10 years ago, like this wouldn't have necessarily been like a value, right, or a fit because there just wasn't. We just weren't at that point, right? So it's interesting to see how this level of technology has come into our industry and become such a key factor to being successful and meeting that consumer demand at the end of the day, right? So, and you guys mentioned a couple times there, like just the vast amount of WMSs that are out there, right? Like you said, like, oh, there's 20, 25 that we're being asked to integrate with for your original problem, right? And it's like, well, we don't want to do that, right? So, tell us a little bit about, why do you think there are so many WMS systems, and what do you think about the market for WMS right now?
I think the simplest answer for why there's so many WMS is at least you could argue that a lot of these different systems say that they specialize in something more specific.
Mm.
Whether it's parcel or you know freight or LTL or food and bev or fashion. So I think a lot of them have been developed with maybe a specific type of warehouse or 3PL or customer in mind. I think over time, a lot of them now try to do everything
Sure.
because that's, your software company, you're trying to take as much TAM as you can. But I think a lot of them originally started on some specific focus or niche area, but have grown over time. So I think that's the main area. But I also think it's just a huge, huge, huge market, right?
Mm.
I actually don't even want to make up a number, how many warehouses there are in the United States alone. I don't know if you know, Kevin or Jeremy, a number, but it's a huge market. And
Yeah.
so I think when there's a huge market, there's always going to be a lot of competition. So that's my not exciting answer, but I think is just the most truthful for why there's so many systems.
Yeah, and I
Mm.
think the only thing I'll add is there's a lot of amazing 3PLs that are some of the largest that it's because they've been around for 30, 40 years. Really amazing family businesses that have grown methodically over time. If they were started in, I mean, it's crazy, 1980, 1990, 30, 40 years ago, there weren't great WMS solutions on the market. So they built something in-house and it worked well. And there's a few IT people who have it held together by duct tape, but they don't want to rip and replace. And Trackstar supports 85 integrations today. Half of those are off-the-shelf WMS that are admittedly more tech-forward. The other half are 3PLs with custom systems. Some of those are definitely more tech-forward, but a lot are 3PLs will admittedly say, like, yeah, this was built years ago. Like, it works. We're not going to rip it out. We don't want to disrupt operations for what could be many months at a time. And that's contributed to the really high fragmentation of the space. And then there's a cycle that we see where because the market's so fragmented, it becomes a really compelling market to enter. Large industry, high fragmentation. I think there's like a stat that ShipHero publishes every Black Friday where I think Shopify is like roughly 30% of e-commerce. And then ShipHero represents, give or take, 5% of Shopify's volume is what they like disclose around Black Friday. That means And then e-commerce is a fraction of total retail. It's like 16% of total retail. That means Ship Hero is like a drop in the bucket if you like do the math, 16% times 30% times the 5%. And I think because the market's so fragmented, really smart people say, oh, I want to go build the WMS and take market share, because even if I capture a percent, I built a really huge business. So it's been this compounding cycle of no one's won the space and people keep building good tech in it. And next thing you know, the fragmentation snowballs.
Yeah, yeah, interesting and interesting perspective there, because I had somebody ask me yesterday, and they're working on a startup, and they're like long term, like, do we make this into a WMS? And I'm like, I say no, because I think there's too many already, right? And then that becomes very difficult to get your product in, because now you also have to convince them to switch WMS systems as well, right? So, I'm curious your thoughts on that, right? I mean, what like where do you think the WMS is evolving to, right? Because we're seeing, as we talked about earlier, I mean, there's so many other now softwares that are just focused on like small parts of the operation, or just like very niche to down flows or processes within the operation that then plug into the WMS, right? So how do you see like the WMS itself evolving into the future, and like what does that future WMS look like in your mind?
I think that especially right now, as margins for 3PLs are getting even thinner, the
Mm,
expectation that the WMS can help them make more money or reduce costs in some way, um, that expectation is higher. And so I think specific features, hard for me to perfectly say, but I think whether it's something like helping, you know, warehouses pick and pack more efficiently, or using AI in some way to help on, find better shipping costs, or whatever it is, it has to be focused around the P&L,
mm,
or you're just not, you're gonna get replaced. Um, and I think it just comes back to how thin the margins have become for 3PLs. Um,
Yeah, and the only thing I would add, and we're seeing WMS become a lot more open. I think Daniel talked about like 5 years ago, our product couldn't exist. WMS know they can't do everything. It's just you're a software company with a defined number of people. You can't build all things for all people. But if you have an open API or you have some way to get data in and out, that means other software companies can build really cool vertical functionality that makes your WMS a better product. And I think the truth is brands here hold the keys to the kingdom. Like 3PLs are buying WMS, but brands are working with 3PLs. And then brands want to buy a whole slew, brands and warehouses want to buy a whole slew of software that improves their operations. Like there's an amazing company that uses our API called Parcel Recharge. They help warehouses solve their working capital pain points around floating shipping costs. Obviously, like 3PLs float shipping costs for brands, it causes a working capital problem. Uh, Warehouses are going to use a WMS that is open, that they can then buy really cool tech like Parcel Recharge to improve their operations. And if a WMS isn't open, the WMS either has to do everything super well, which is never possible, or the WMS can say, hey, we play nice with all this other amazing software that does invoicing or does parcel optimization or does inventory forecasting. It doesn't matter. There's a whole slew of solutions. So I think there's two bets. WMS either have to do everything in house, or just play nice with a lot of software and be able to tell your customers, oh, by the way, here's amazing tools you can buy to fill in the gaps in the margins of where our product happens to not have as robust functionality. And we're seeing a lot of that. Like folks are definitely really open and want integrations because they know it benefits them, benefits the WMS because it benefits the warehouses and the merchants end of the day.
mm. Interesting. Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see in the 3PL space, like, there's WMSs, because I certainly see the 3PLs being more open to trying new tech, right, or trying like a new WMS versus some of these larger corporations like that are doing their own self-fulfillment and things like that, or maybe have homegrown systems like you mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, do you think that it's smarter as an operator to go for a WMS that is like feature heavy, has more features, or maybe a WMS that's maybe less features but more open to like these other integrations and bringing in other partners or different softwares to support whatever they might want to accomplish.
I think Daniel and I are admittedly biased. We would go the second route.
Sure.
But it's also our product philosophy, and this comes from Daniel's very technical background. But you can't be all things for all people. Like we have people at Trackstar. People ask Trackstar all the time to build integrations into other systems. They'll be like, "Can you build me a TMS integration? Can you build me a yard management system integration? Can you build me XYZ?" Yeah, we could theoretically, but we want to specialize and be the best at what we do. And I think anyone who specializes in solving working capital pain points for warehouses, or inventory forecasting for brands, or invoicing for warehouses, doesn't really matter. They're going to do a better job being hyper specialized in building the best solution they can in that market than a WMS who's going to have to build so many pieces of functionality for all people. So we're biased because I think that benefits Trackstar, but we're also biased because the philosophy we ascribe to is be very focused and disciplined and build a very deep and rich product rather than building a very wide product. And integrations and connectivity mean WMS can't be wide and deep at the same time. It's very difficult to do that.
Interesting. Yeah, and I guess you guys are a little biased there. I'll say. Yeah, but I think that makes sense, definitely, and I think especially as we talked about, like just seeing the more solutions that are coming into space and evolving and things of that nature. So with Trackstar, I mean, when do you come into play, right? So if I'm an operator, right, am I your customer, or is the software that's leveraging you for the integration, is that your customer? How does that relationship work?
So warehouses and 3PLs and WMSs are our partners. They are not our customers. We don't charge them anything, especially not to integrate with them, right? We are simply building that connectivity layer for them that can be leveraged by software companies. And so, yes, these software companies of the world who need these integrations are our customers. And so our benefit to the merchants and the 3PLs and the warehouses is we provide that connectivity layer without burdening them, and it allows them to access all this amazing software, like Jeremy just gave one example, very, very quickly, right? So they can leverage, inventory forecasting tools and ERPs and financial products and different return systems, all without having to, build the integration on their side. So it just enables this amazing ecosystem and these, really positive customer experiences with just a, click of a button through Trackstar.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, Kevin, our customers are the software companies. Because if you are if you're a software tool that sells to brands or warehouses, the challenge, as we talked about before, is and it's the challenge Trackstar V1 had back in the day. The first brand you talk to is on system A, the next one's on system B, the next one's on system D, and then every brand's on a different WMS, every warehouse is on a different WMS. One of a few things happens. You either build each integration and onboard each customer, and then next thing you know, you have multiple people building integrations really slowly, and it's super expensive and really inefficient. Or you say no to customers. You say, I'm not going to onboard you because you're always, hey brand, your 3PL is on a custom WMS. I'm not going to build that because I don't know I'm going to onboard the next customer on that system. Building that integration is more expensive than onboarding you. And the next thing you know, these software companies, they're stuck selling to 2% of their addressable TAM because they don't have any integrations. So the benefit we provide is to the software company. We make it so they don't have to spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of engineering resources to build integrations, while at the same time, it lets their sales teams close any deal no matter what the underlying WMS is. everyone in the ecosystem benefits, but the biggest beneficiary is those software companies who can now onboard anyone no matter what the underlying system is.
Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It kind of expands the potential customers essentially, right? And
Yeah.
kind of takes some of those barriers down. Very interesting and very smart to kind of fall into this problem that you found and say like, you know what, we are going to take this on. I think really a great thing there. So now you guys are kind of naturally, it sounds like, seeing some of these new softwares that are coming into the industry and what people are building. So can you share with us like what kind of softwares or companies are coming up that are looking pretty exciting for you?
Yeah, I think the most topical um, is around navigating tariffs.
Mm.
Um, I don't need to repeat any of what we already know with all this stuff going on with tariffs, but there's this whole, and I'm not a tariff expert, so if I say anything incorrect, uh, someone correct me. But there's a process around tariff duty reconciliation and drawbacks where
Mm.
you pay tariffs for the goods you import, but then if you end up selling a product back outside the United States, you actually get money back for the tariff that you paid on that import. Right, Jeremy? Did I
Mm.
get that right? Is
Yeah,
that the
yeah.
gist?
Or that's the gist.
Right. And so understanding all that information of the tariff code and where the product went and came all lives in the WMS. And so we're working with different folks who are building solutions around handling this tariff situation, and that is just one example of something that can be really automated with software. Fascinating problem, can immediately start saving tons of people money, and really hard to build if you don't have these WMS integrations, because you're, again, have to unlock this data from all these different WMS to support all these customers. So that's a really, really topical one that is really exciting, very cool, and a perfect use case for software and software that needs to integrate with the WMS.
Interesting. And that's something that somebody is building, or that's just like an idea you have?
Oh no, multiple companies are using
Okay.
are using our API for that use case where
Mm.
they, within their UI, have a connect your WMS button. They automatically ingest a brand's data from a WMS, and then that helps automate this duty drawback process so they can tell a brand, based on how much inventory you ship back overseas and throughout, we think you can get XYZ refund from the US government. Let's go file that on your behalf. I'm butchering sure there's a lot more nuance in the use case, but that's a really cool thing that we're seeing. Another use case that we love is like ERP of the future. I think what's really interesting is NetSuite's been around forever, a huge company, not the best for seamless integrations. If you're a brand and you onboard onto NetSuite, you pay system integrators to build connectivity into all your different technology. So like brand onboards onto NetSuite, spends 6 months and hundreds of thousands of dollars getting set up. But then what always happens is 6 months, 12 months later, you either add a new 3PL or you switch 3PLs because something goes wrong. And then you go, well, my new WMS isn't connected to NetSuite. You have two options. You either hire a system integrator to do the work again, and you're like banging your head against the wall, being like, I thought I was done with this. I can't believe we have to be building integrations into NetSuite for the end of time. Or you just say, I'm going to manually upload stuff into NetSuite, and you have someone who's literally manually doing it. The ERPs of the future, of which we work with a lot of them, their whole worldview is not every brand is a snowflake. There are common flows we can solve, and we want seamless connectivity into every single system a brand has. So onboarding onto a new ERP doesn't take 6 to 12 to 18 months on NetSuite. Now you can do it super seamlessly and super quickly. And by the way, brands, we know your businesses are always changing. Don't worry, we connect to the evolving needs of your business as well. There's going to be some really huge multi-billion-dollar companies building this ERP of the future. And we're really excited to support those folks. But that's another one that we're seeing pop up a lot. I'm trying to think if there's anything else there's always classics, a lot of inventory forecasting tools, a lot of inventory management systems. And then there's some more niche flows we're supporting around customer support, order editing. That's just like a small taste of the types of data and flows that we see today.
Very interesting, and really interesting use cases there as well. And I think it's very interesting because I teach a class, and we focused a lot on SAP and ERP systems, but a lot of that, like much like I think the WMS industry became kind of antiquated a little bit in a sense, and and that's why we see now a lot of different WMS iterations and reinventions of what that looks like, and moving to cloud and versus on-prem and all that stuff, and it'd be interesting to see kind of that disruption in the ERP space continue to evolve, as you talked about there, Jeremy, as well. So really interesting talking to you both today here and learning more about Trackstar and getting some of the inside views on what's going on with WMS and other technologies in our space as well. And you guys are in a perfect position to give us that inside view because you're making those little connections happen, right? So very interesting to learn from you guys. And if people are interested to find out more about Trackstar and what you're doing, what's the best way to get in touch or learn more?
Our website is trackstarhq, like headquarters.com. You could also shoot us an email at founders@trackstarhq.com. But yeah, that's where we are.
All right, awesome. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes here so people can easily find it. And actually, I got to ask you the last question. The name Trackstar, where does it come from?
It's a great question. It was, so when we were working on the original product, right, we were tracking things. So we kind of, we were monitoring and tracking things. And I don't know exactly how it came into my head, but I was at the gym one day and I thought of the name. But allegedly, I don't know how Jeremy would know this. I don't know how.
I allege this. I say this is what must have happened, but I'll let Daniel tell it.
Jeremy said allegedly. You must have heard that song that was popular a couple years ago that went, "She's a runner, she's a track star," and it must have been in the back. But that's Jeremy alleging. I have no idea. So it just, and then that was the name for the original product, and we just liked the name. People already kind of knew us as like, the Trackstar guys. So we were like, let's keep the name. We like it. It's, it's easy to spell, easy to find. So we just kept it.
Very, very. Yeah. I mean, it sticks in your head for sure. Yeah. Because I know, I think the first time I heard of you guys, like I never forgot the name, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, Trackstar. Like that's, I mean, it's a different kind of name for our space. Like it doesn't have the word ship.
Doesn't have the ship.
Yeah.
No ship.
Yeah.
That's the biggest offender. Yeah. Ship is pretty bad. No offense to anyone with ship in their name, but yeah, you're not.
It's like 80% of my audience, right? So you just singled them out. Yeah. No problem. So pleasure to talk to you both, and we will definitely get all the information about Trackstar over at thenewwarehouse.com. So thank you, Daniel and Jeremy, for your time on the show today.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.